What if I told you the Amish figured out long-term, grid-free food preservation over 200 years ago, and it's something most modern families pay $2,500 a year to avoid? Between sky-high electricity bills for running multiple refrigerators and deep freezers, the staggering cost of replacing spoiled groceries, and the exorbitant price tags on commercially freeze-dried emergency meals, we are paying a premium for a fragile system. In the next 20 minutes, I'm going to show you exactly how they do it, and how you can start today. I'm Mikhail Yoder, and this is something I wish someone had shown me years ago. Most people think that keeping food safe for months or years requires a massive, noisy generator, expensive modern freeze-drying equipment, or a cocktail of chemical preservatives. That's what we've been told. That's what the whole commercial food and appliance industry wants us to believe. But Amish communities, who've been living without municipal electricity, modern refrigeration, or complex supply chains for generations, discovered something that completely changes that picture. These aren't myths. These aren't folk tales passed down around a fire. This is a living, working system that has kept over 350,000 people fully self-sufficient for over 150 years. And today I'm breaking it down into 6 methods that any family can start using. No special equipment, no expensive tools, nothing you can't do this weekend. The first method is called dry sand root cellaring, or the Earth-Box method. Here's exactly how it works. You start by acquiring a sturdy, breathable wooden crate. Plastic bins trap too much moisture and will cause your harvest to rot. Line the bottom of the wooden crate with a few layers of plain, unscented newspaper to prevent sand from spilling out of the slats. Next, pour in about 2 inches of slightly damp, untreated play sand or masonry sand. Take your unwashed root vegetables, carrots, beets, parsnips, or winter radishes, and trim the green tops off completely, leaving about ½ inch of the stem to prevent the vegetable from bleeding. Place the vegetables in the sand so that they are resting horizontally, making absolute sure that no 2 vegetables are touching each other. If they touch, a single rotten spot can spread like wildfire. Cover that layer entirely with more damp sand, and repeat the process until the crate is full, finishing with a thick top layer of sand. Store this crate in the coolest, darkest part of your basement or garage. What makes this method special is that the sand acts as a natural microclimate regulator. It traps the perfect amount of humidity to keep the vegetables crisp and hydrated, while the physical barrier of the sand blocks light and oxygen, effectively putting the produce into a state of suspended animation. An average family using this method can save $800 a year on winter grocery bills and reduce their household food waste by up to 60%. The Amish simply call this traditional root cellaring, and once you understand the logic behind using earth to insulate your food, you'll wonder why nobody taught you this in school. Now here's where it gets really interesting. The second method is water glassing eggs. Most people have never heard of this one, and that's exactly the problem. We are completely conditioned to believe that eggs must be refrigerated immediately. Here is the exact step-by-step process. You will need a clean, food-grade bucket or a large half-gallon glass mason jar. The ratio is incredibly simple. For every 1 quart of filtered, non-chlorinated water, you weigh out exactly 1 ounce of pickling lime, which is also known as calcium hydroxide. Whisk the lime into the water until it is completely dissolved. The water will look milky. Next, you must source farm-fresh, unwashed eggs. This is non-negotiable. The eggs must have their natural, invisible protective coating, called the bloom, completely intact. Carefully submerge the clean, unwashed eggs into the lime water, pointed side down, making sure there is at least 2 inches of liquid covering the top layer of eggs. Seal the bucket with a tight-fitting lid to prevent the water from evaporating, and store it in a cool pantry. What separates this from anything you'd find in a modern grocery store approach is the sheer longevity and lack of energy dependence. The calcium hydroxide naturally fills and seals the microscopic pores of the eggshells, preventing oxygen and bacteria from entering while keeping the egg's internal moisture from escaping. A family of 4 who does this consistently will secure a continuous, high-quality protein source through the dead of winter without relying on the power grid or paying inflated winter egg prices. There's a reason this practice has survived for generations. It simply works better than the modern alternative, keeping eggs perfectly fresh and ready to fry, bake, or boil for up to 18 to 24 months. The third method surprised even me when I first came across it. It's called cold potting or meat confit. To do this properly, you start with high-quality cuts of pork or beef. Cut the meat into manageable chunks and slow cook it in its own fat on a low simmer until it is incredibly tender. And every drop of water has been drawn out and evaporated. Water is the enemy of preservation. Once the meat is fully cooked, sterilize a heavy stoneware crock with boiling water and dry it completely. Pack the steaming hot meat tightly into the bottom of the crock, pressing down firmly to ensure there are no air pockets hidden between the pieces. Finally, take liquefied, freshly rendered lard and pour a thick layer entirely over the hot meat. You need a fat cap that is at least 2 to 3 inches thick covering the top. As the crock cools, the lard solidifies into a dense, impenetrable white block. You then store the crock in a cool cellar or basement around 45°, 55° first. Whenever you need meat for a winter stew, you simply scrape back the fat cap, dig out what you need, melt the fat back down, and reseal it. The thing most people get wrong when they try this for the first time is failing to remove the moisture from the meat during the cooking phase, or failing to pour a thick enough fat cap. If water is left inside the crock, or if the fat cap cracks and lets oxygen in, the meat will spoil quickly. Avoid that, and you're already ahead of 90% of people who attempt it. The Amish have a guiding principle about this. Where the winter air cannot reach, the winter rot cannot bite, and it captures exactly why this method works so well. The fat completely isolates the sterile, cooked meat from the oxygen and bacteria of the outside world, moving right along to a method that transforms food into a powerful health tool: deep cold crocking, fundamentally known as lacto-fermentation. For this, you will need freshly harvested cabbage, root vegetables, or cucumbers. Let's look at the classic sauerkraut process. First, finely shred your cabbage and weigh it on a kitchen scale. You must then calculate exactly 2% to 2.5% of the cabbage's weight in pure, non-iodized sea salt. Sprinkle the salt over the cabbage in a large bowl and aggressively massage it with your hands for about 10 to 15 minutes. The salt will forcefully draw the natural water out of the cabbage, creating its own brine. Pack the salted cabbage tightly into a large stoneware crock, pressing down hard until the natural brine rises completely above the vegetables. Place a wooden follower board on top and weigh it down with a boiled, sterilized river stone. Leave it at room temperature around 65°F for 2 to 3 weeks until it finishes bubbling. Then move the heavy crock down to the cold cellar. What makes this method special is that it doesn't just preserve the food, it chemically enhances it. The naturally occurring lactobacillus bacteria on the vegetable skins consume the sugars and convert them into lactic acid. This acid drops the pH level so low that harmful bacteria simply cannot survive. An average family using this method can radically boost their gut health and winter immunity while preserving massive summer harvests with literally zero energy cost. The common mistake to avoid here is using tap water or iodized table salt. Municipal tap water contains chlorine, which will instantly kill the beneficial bacteria you need to preserve the food, and iodine will turn the vegetables dark and mushy. The fifth technique is an ingenious way to keep food fresh in the open air: wax sealing. This is primarily used for hard, aged cheeses, but the Amish also use it for perfect, unblemished late-harvest apples and root crops. Here is exactly how it is done. You start by melting food-grade cheese wax or natural beeswax in a double boiler. Never melt wax directly over a flame, as it is highly flammable. Keep the temperature steady around 160°F. Take your block of hard, low-moisture cheese, like cheddar or Parmesan or a pristine, unbruised apple, and carefully dip exactly 1/2 of it into the hot liquid wax. Hold it there for 3 seconds, pull it out, and let the wax harden in the air, which takes about 30 seconds. Then, flip the food over and dip the other half, ensuring the wax overlaps the middle by at least an inch to create a seamless seal. Repeat this entire process 2 or 3 times until you have a thick, protective shell. You can then store these items on wooden shelves in a cool room for months or even years. What separates this from modern plastic wrapping or vacuum sealing is that the wax creates a custom-fit, rigid exoskeleton that entirely prevents the food's natural moisture from evaporating while blocking out mold spores and pests. A family of 4 who does this consistently will save massive amounts of money by buying cheese in bulk wheels directly from dairies, aging it themselves to increase its value and flavor. The thing most people get wrong when they try this is waxing over a damp surface. If the cheese or the apple has even a drop of condensation on the outside, before dipping, the wax will not adhere and mold will grow inside the moisture pocket. Dry everything thoroughly, and you will have a preservation method that has stood the test of time for centuries. The 6th and final method is the undisputed king of long-term preservation: heavy salt curing and hardwood cold smoking. This is a multi-step process that demands patience but yields incredible results. You begin by creating a dry cure mixture, heavily mixing coarse kosher salt, dark brown sugar, and a tiny, precise amount of sodium nitrite, often called pink, curing salt or saltpeter. You take a large cut of raw meat like a whole pork leg or a slab of bacon and vigorously rub the cure into every square inch of the flesh, packing it especially deep around any exposed bones. You wrap the meat tightly and let it cure in a cool environment under 40° Faith for exactly 1 day for every 2 pounds of meat. The salt physically pulls the moisture out of the cellular walls of the meat. After the curing time is up, you wash off the excess salt and hang the meat to dry until a sticky layer called a pellicle forms on the surface. Finally, you move the meat to a smokehouse. You burn green hickory, applewood, or cherry wood over a smoldering fire, keeping the ambient temperature very low between 70°F and 9°F. You allow the thick smoke to envelop the hanging meat for anywhere from 3 days to 3 weeks. What separates this from anything you'd find in a modern grocery store is the absolute absence of chemical injections or artificial liquid smoke. The cold smoke bathes the meat in natural phenols and formaldehydes, which are potent antimicrobial compounds that create an impenetrable shield on the outside of the meat. A family who does this consistently will gain the ultimate independence, able to store hams hanging from their pantry rafters at room temperature for over a year without a second thought. The common mistake to avoid here is letting the fire get too hot. If your smokehouse rises above 100° Fath, you are no longer cold smoking, you are cooking the meat, which ruins the preservation process and invites spoilage. Keep the fire low and smoldering, and you're already ahead of 90% of people who attempt it. The Amish have a saying about this exact process: patience is the only preservative that salt cannot buy. And it captures perfectly why rushing a cold smoke always leads to ruin. Now you have 6 incredibly powerful methods that Amish families have quietly used for generations, while the rest of us were paying full price for the problem they solved long ago. You do not need to rely on the fragile grid. You do not need to panic when the power goes out or when inflation hits the grocery aisles. If you're not sure where to begin, start with water glassing eggs. You can do it this weekend with zero special equipment. It only takes 10 minutes of active work, and most people see results within the first week as they watch their pantry shelves fill with reliable, long-term protein. If this was useful, go ahead and subscribe. I'm putting out a new video tomorrow breaking down even more off-grid survival skills, and I don't want you to miss it. And drop a comment right now. Which of these 6 methods are you trying first? I read every single one.